Chapter 11. Sam, Salone, and Ezra drove their weary horses up Lonesome Creek Canyon at a killing pace as the intermittent crackling of pistol and rifle fire continued to echo down between the canyon walls. Young Ben Andrews was right at their heels, though neither of them was giving him a second thought. Sam was a few feet ahead of his heavier companion when his horse gave a snort of terror and leapt aside from the trail. Sam checked him and leaned from the saddle and saw the dim outline of a dead horse laying on its side, and a few feet away was a faint blur of darkness on the trail that looked like a man's body. Sam jumped from the saddle as Ezra and Andrews came thundering up. He wasted one close look at the dead horse and realized it was Pat's favorite roan, the one Pat was riding when he left Powder Valley. He shouted this information to Ezra while he trotted on to a halt beside the limp body of Pat Stevens laying on his back in the trail. Pat's face was turned up to the starlight sky, and his eyes were closed. His features looked like death, with a look of complete peace imprinted upon them. Sam Salone tugged off his hat before he dropped to his knees beside his stricken partner. He heard Ezra dismount and, clumsily coming towards him, was faintly cautious that the shooting was continuing up the canyon, that Andrews was spurring past in that direction, shouting something. Sam didn't know what Andrews shouted. He didn't care what the youngster did, nor what the shooting was all about. It had never before entered into Sam's mind that Pat Stevens was only human, and would someday die like any other man. He had simply never thought about Pat that way. The three of them had often joked about death as though it was something that happened to other people, as though it was never something that actually touched upon them. He touched his fingertips wonderingly to Pat's forehead. Yep. The flesh felt cold as ice. He struck a match as Ezra lumbered up beside him. In the flickering circle of illumination, he saw Pat's disarranged clothing and the bloody bandages that Helen had applied some hours previous. Pat? The single word was jerked disbelievingly from Ezra's lips as he dropped to his knees beside Sam. Sam nodded, his uncovered head somberly. The yellow light of the match flickered out between his fingertips. Big, one-eyed Ezra lifted his hand and slowly pushed off his floppy black hat. In a voice that was choked with grief, he muttered, "Must have happened while we were arguing with that kid back yonder." Sam replied, "Yup, I reckon." He rocked back on his heels and forced his numb fingers to roll a cigarette. Ezra, what are we going to do? Still in the choked tone of disbelief. Sam thumbnailed the match. When he stuck flame into the crimped end of his cigarette, the yellow light showed his dark features set in harsh lines of determination. "There ain't but one thing for us to do," he said after a time. "Carry him out of here?" Sam shook his head slowly. He carefully dislodged a flake of tobacco from his upper lip with his tongue and spat it out on the ground. "I ain't studying about Pat no more. I'm concerned with the fellers that done this." Ezra lifted his big head to listen. The rattle of firing from up the creek had dropped to desultory and sporadic outbursts. He grunted. "That Andrew kid's up there with his rifle." Funny thing, Sam meditated. There was shooting still going on after I found Pat laying here, which means there must be more of 'em than Pat in the fight. "Aren't we get up and we try and whack at 'em?" "Ain't no hurry," Sam decreed calmly. "From what we heard, there ain't no other way up the canyon. No other way out other than them coming through here. We can set a decent while with Pat, I reckon. That's all we can do for him now." "I can't believe it, Sam," Ezra whispered shakingly after a minute of silence. "I can't get it out of my head that Pat just won't rise up and start laughing any minute. It'd be just like him to be playing possum." "Did you see what I saw when I struck the first match?" "Sure, I saw all right, but that don't make no difference. Why, Pat, Hell, Sam, have you thought about Sally and little Doc? They're going to be taking this pretty hard." "Mighty damn hard," Sam agreed somberly. "Sally would want 'em brought back to Powder Valley." "I reckon so. Women are kind of funny that way. As if it makes any difference where a man lays to be slapped in the face with a shovelful of dirt." They were both silent for a longer period. All shooting had stopped up the creek, and the abrupt sound from that direction was a terrifying impact upon the two men. There was a brooding, unnatural quality about the night's silence, and it seemed to close down upon them with a smothering effect, as though all of nature passed momentarily to mourn with them in the passing of their comrade. Ezra stirred uneasily, and he looked at Sam in the faint glow that came and went as he sucked on a cigarette. A pebble was dislodged under his boot, and it rattled down against a boulder. Ezra shivered and said forlorn, "There's generally a bottle of whiskey to pass around at wakes. I'd feel more like squatting here if I had me a drink." "Well, it's too bad we didn't come ready to set up with a body," Sam agreed. He took a final suck on his cigarette and spun the butt away in a glowing arc to sizzle out in Lonesome Creek, and he got up muttering, "Well, suppose we ride up there and flush 'em out. You stay here to pick off them that get by me." Ezra said, "I'm riding with you. None of 'em will get past both of us." He started to get up, relaxed, looking down at Pat Stevens' lax body. "I reckon I ought to carry him off the trail a little so he doesn't get trampled on if anyone rides by." "He wouldn't mind getting trampled on," Sam began with a flash of his normal humor, but he checked himself awkwardly and agreed, "Yeah, I reckon you best put him up there with them rocks." Ezra got his big hands underneath Pat's body and tenderly lifted the supposed corpus into his arms. Pat groaned, and a tremor of returning consciousness coursed down the length of his body. Ezra shuddered and almost dropped him and stared down fearfully at Pat's face, and he stammered, "God damn it, Sam, maybe he don't want to be moved." "What kind of crazy talk is this?" Sam paused on his way to his horse. "It kind of sounded like he said something when I picked him up. I swear to God, it sounded like he did. I sure never thought Pat would be one to come back to haunt us." Sam interrupted his faltering words with a sudden exclamation. He stumbled excitingly to Ezra's side and plunged his hand under Pat's shirt and jacket to the vicinity of his heart. He shook his head, murmured, "I can't feel no heartbeat, but I swear, Ezra, he feels kind of warm. You reckon?" "He just gived another shake," Ezra reported, excited, "like a snake that keeps wriggling after you chop his head off, but I never heard of no man doing that." "Lay him down here," Sam ordered roughly. He struck another match and held the flame close to one of Pat's eyelids, leaned down to observe the result intently. He emitted a loud shout when the Ezra fluttered involuntarily under the scorching heat. "Get some water from the crick. Get a hatful of it." Ezra grabbed off his hat and lumbered down to the creek. He trotted back with a hatful of water, which he dumped unceremoniously on Pat's face. The unconscious man responded to this rough treatment by rolling his head sideways. "That's the ticket," Sam cried out happily. "Douse him some more. He'll come out of her when he gets mad enough. Ezra went to the crick and returned with more cold water. Pat groaned this time and opened his eyes and stared at him wildly, and he said, "Helen," in a weak voice, and then, "Helen, where are you?" "By gosh, are we going to have something to tell Sally?" excluded Sam. "Does he think about his wife when he comes back from the dead?" "Heck no. Not a word about his lone loving wife. It's Helen he's worried about." "Oh, shut up," Ezra ordered. He bent over Pat and said soothingly, "Take it easy, feller. It's Ezra and Sam." Pat murmured, "Ezra? Sam?" in odd undertone. He shuddered and let his eyelids flutter shut again. "Well, then I'm dead. I thought so. But I didn't know a man dreamed when he was dead." "You ain't dead and you ain't dreaming." Ezra caught him by the shoulder with one huge hand and shook him violently. "It's us, your old partners. We're here." "Which proves I'm either dead or dreaming," Pat said wearily. "You can't be here. This ain't Powder Valley. You're both too old to leave the peace and quiet of the bar, yes. That proves that you ain't here. Yet I got the funny idea I'm hearing your voices, so I must be dead or dreaming. And I ain't asleep, so I can't be dreaming." He sighed unhappily at this inescapable logic. "Too damn old to leave the peace and quiet of the bar, yes," Ezra snorted to Sam. "Did you hear what he said, Sam? Damn if it wouldn't have served him right if we was off to ride off here and leave him just be laying." "That's just what I was thinking," Sam agreed sourly. "Casting slurs at us while he's the one that's laying down and quitting if a bullet comes close to him." Pat waggled his head from side to side. "I keep hearing voices, but they don't be saying nothing," he complained. "Reminds me of old times when I had a couple gun partners named Sam and Ezra that could talk more without saying nothing than any two other men I ever knew before. But that was years ago, when they hadn't gotten gun shy and weren't afraid to take the trail with them. Them days are gone," he sighed wearily. "Well, that ties it," says Sam in a loud, angry voice. "Come on, Ezra. Let's leave him here laying wallering in his own blood. We'll ride back and tell Sally how we seen him there go floating off on a cloud, murmuring sweet nothings about a angel named Helen." "Helen Higgins!" Pat echoed the name sharply. He painfully raised himself up to one elbow to peer upwards through the night gloom at his two disgruntled partners. "Where is she?" "Well, let's see now," Sam temporized. "Did you have her in your pocket last, Ezra, or was that me? It seems like—" "Oh, shut up your brain, you damned fool," raged Pat. "I'm asking you straight out, what happened to the girl?" "We don't go sashaying around after no gals, not Ezra and me. Takes a married man to—" "I remember now." Pat sank back to the ground exhausted. "Why you two damn fools stand around making funny jokes, there's a girl getting herself killed up there at the gang's hideout, trying to save my life. That's why she grabbed my saddle gun and rode back instead of getting away and saving her own skin." "Wait a minute." Sam's voice crackled explosively. He dropped to one knee beside Pat. "Are you telling us the straight?" "Straight as a gun'll shoot," Pat murmured. "Did you say Helen Higgins?" "Yeah. Moses' girl." Pat's voice began to fade as his strength ebbed swiftly. "She's a girl to tie to, all right. She could have got away safe, but she wouldn't do it. Rode back by herself. And there's 6 of them back there at the cabin." Pat's voice faded away to pathetic silence in the final words. Sam lifted his head and glowered at Ezra. "You think he's gone out of his head?" "I don't know. It sounds like it. Don't stand to reason no baby gal would grab up a rifle like he says and go back there and stand off 6 men." "That's right. He did tell us back there in Powder Valley that Mose Higgins had a baby gal he was coming to fetch back home for Sally to raise. Sam shook his head wearily. You reckon he was lying to us about how old she was, slipping away from Sally and us to meet up with her? Wouldn't surprise me none. Best way to find out is to ride up to that cabin and see whether Helen wears a diaper or a long skirt. Well, what do we do with him? Sam looked down at Pat's relaxed body. Oh, leave him and lay there, suggested Ezra cheerfully. I plumb sure know that no bullet ain't gonna kill Pat Stevens. He's too damn no account. I guess you're right. I'll roll him up in one of those rocks where he can get comfortable and not get trampled if anyone should ride past. Sam bent and lifted up Pat, stumbled a few feet off the trail, and lowered him onto a bed of rounded boulders washed up there by a spring flood. He trotted back and swung into the saddle beside Ezra, grunting. I reckon now that Andrews boys said something about Helen Higgins being took up here by the gang and said her daddy was dead. Ezra cleared his throat as they urged their horses up the canyon trail. I feel bad in my stomach, he admitted miserably. You remember all that shooting that kept going on while we were setting around mourning over Pat? Must have been that girl holding off the gang like he was saying. And there ain't been no shooting for the last 10 minutes, Sam agreed. Kinda looks like we messed up proper. With this dismal foreboding, they pushed their horses up the trail as fast as the tired beasts could make the stiff climb. There was complete silence ahead of them in the vicinity of the hideout cabin, and the shadows of the bottom of the canyon grew deeper as the perpendicular walls rose higher on each side. They were almost upon the cabin before they realized it, because the hanging lantern had been extinguished above the door, and it was merely a darker blotch in the shadows, like an unholy some growth attached to the rock wall of the canyon. They reined up simultaneously 100 feet from the log structure and leaned forward to peer through the darkness at the silent cabin. Not a single ray of light showed through any of the cracks, nor was there a slightest sign of life discernible to them. They sat their horses silently for a moment, fighting back an eerie feeling of uncertainty that gripped them. And then Ezra laughed recklessly deep in his throat and spurred his horse forward. He leapt to the ground in front of the closed door and pounded on it, while Sam advanced a little cautiously. Ezra turned the knob and rattled it, but the door appeared to be barred on the inside. He drew back with an oath and threw his weight against it, shaking the log structure on its rock foundation. Flame erupted in his face as he did so from the muzzles of unseen guns poking out through the wide crack in the door. Ezra staggered back to his knees, and a second vicious salvo roared over his head. He came crawling back to Sam with blood streaming down his cheek with a neat crease upon the side of his head, and said fretfully, I reckon there's somebody in there after all. I reckon maybe, Sam agreed in disgust. You walked into that one like a lame-brained kid that ain't had time to dry behind the ears yet. Luckily they had their guns aimed high enough to get you in the head, else you would have got bad hurt. Yeah, Ezra agreed cheerfully. That was lucky for me, far as I'm concerned. They can stay right there inside their dang log house until they rot. That'd be all right, except I reckon they got the gal and Ben Andrews in there with them. How do you reckon that? Where else would they go? Sam gestured towards the cabin, to the blank wall of rock where the canyon dead-ended. Kinda looks like the end of the trail to me. Yeah. So you're saying it's up to us to get 'em out, huh? Well, it's our fault they're in there, Sam reminded him. He squatted down cross-legged and began rolling a cigarette while Ezra got out a red bandana and dabbed up the bleeding flesh just above his right eye. He was perfectly content to let Sam take charge now. Sam was good at thinking up strategies when a frontal attack failed. End of chapter 11.